In the quiet town of Havenbrook, Oregon, tucked between the dense pines of the Pacific Northwest, there was a stretch of road the locals called Whispering Hollow, where for decades people claimed to see lights flickering in the fog, long before any modern street lamps had been installed. And it was along that road in October 1999 that 32-year-old high school history teacher Martin Keene moved into an old Victorian home, a creaking, ivy-covered building that had stood abandoned for nearly 20 years at the edge of town. Purchased for a fraction of its value due to rumors that it had been the site of a mysterious disappearance in the 1970s, a young couple who had vanished one stormy night, leaving only their car abandoned at the end of the driveway. And though Martin dismissed the stories as small-town superstition, he could not deny that the house had an air of watchfulness, an almost imperceptible sensation that someone or something was always observing from the corner of the high-ceilinged rooms. Particularly at night when the wind rattled the windows in such a way that it sounded like whispering voices in a language he could almost understand. For the first few weeks, life was normal enough. Martin unpacked boxes of books and old artifacts he had collected from various historical sites, arranged the furniture, and even befriended a neighbor, Clara Simmons, who often dropped by with pie or advice about the eccentricities of the town. But it was during one particularly cold and rainy night that the strangeness began to grow more tangible. He awoke to the sound of footsteps in the attic, slow, deliberate pacing back and forth. But when he climbed the stairs with a flashlight, the space was empty except for the dust motes dancing in the beams, though the floorboards were warm under his hands as though someone had been lying there recently. Over the next several weeks, things escalated incrementally. Doors that had been locked were found ajar, small items of clothing were rearranged, and sometimes Martin would find strange carvings on the walls, lines that resembled tally marks at first, but upon closer inspection formed abstract, almost human shapes that seemed to shift slightly each time he looked away. What unsettled him most was the sense of being followed. Even when he walked the quiet streets of Havenbrook in daylight, shadows flitted just beyond his vision. And once, in a local grocery store, he thought he saw a man staring at him from the end of an aisle, wearing a tattered coat that hung off his frame, and a hat that shadowed his face so completely he could not discern any features. Yet, when Martin turned, the aisle was empty. One night, as the wind howled, the rain streaked down the windows like icy fingers, Martin heard a knock at the front door. Slow and deliberate. Peering through the peephole, he saw no one, yet the doorknob twisted slightly under pressure, as though someone were trying to enter without leaving footprints. Martin's fear grew, but it wasn't until the following week that he realized he was not alone in the house at all times. He returned home from work to find the kitchen table set for dinner, with food he had not prepared, and a single note written in a shaky hand that read, "I've been waiting." Panic-stricken, he called the police, but officers found no one. The house was empty. As the days passed, Martin started hearing voices, whispering through the shadows. Soft, human murmurs, sometimes calling his name, other times uttering unintelligible threats, yet always with the distinct cadence of someone learning his habits, tracking him through the house and outside in the empty streets. Then came the nights he discovered a hidden room behind the attic wall, concealed by a bookshelf filled with old, dusty books. Inside the room was furnished like a living space, a mattress, chairs, and belongings clearly used in recent weeks, including photographs of Martin, taken when he was alone, sometimes asleep. It dawned on him with horror that someone had been living in the house with him, watching his every move, learning him, understanding his patterns, and the realization that this person could have been anywhere at any time, that the very walls he considered private were occupied by a human predator, made the house feel like a trap rather than a home. For nights afterwards, Martin would hear footsteps pacing directly above his head, even when he knew he had locked the attic door, and he started noticing that small details in his daily life changed subtly. His coffee mug would be moved, his shoes repositioned, and once a knife left on the kitchen counter in a deliberate display that seemed to say, "I know where you are, and I can get to you anytime." By late November, Martin barely slept, constantly checking every door, every window, and every closet. But the terror reached its peak when one foggy evening, he returned home to find a note pinned to his front door in a handwriting he recognized, his own. It read simply, "You're never alone." He never discovered who was living in the house. Police investigations turned up no evidence, no prints, and the hidden room was suddenly empty as if abandoned weeks ago. But Martin eventually sold the house and left Havenbrook. Yet, years later, locals claim the Victorian still stands quiet, waiting. And if you drive down Whispering Hollow on a foggy October night, some swear you can see a figure in the window, watching, learning, living in the shadows where you think you are safe.